Alright, so we're more or less done with the texturing process and stuff, and we can actually just do some final touches. Let's take a look at the eyeballs for now and see if we like the settings. As you can see, we have like high specularity point too, which means they're going to be shiny. And so what I want to do is actually just create another light, and or maybe even like a couple more lights, and just kind of play around with the settings a bit, just to try and get a bit, a better cinematic lighting feel to it. And so I'm just going to delete these and save this because this is where we're at the minute. And so basically, if you just come to Arnold and lights and just click on an area light, and we can just make it a bit bigger. And now the size of the area light determines the strength of the light itself and also the distance. So keep that in mind. And so basically, I like to make the area light fairly big and just point it at an angle. I'm just going to switch the rotate tool to object mode and just kind of point at an angle to make it more interesting instead of just having flat lighting from the front. And so we can call this the front light, and one thing you can do is be mindful of the position of the sun, which I believe is from around here. That seems to be the brightest spot. So if you want to, you can actually put the light coming from this direction to mimic the direction of the sun, but I'm not going for realism. It's entirely up to you. I tend to go with more of a stylistic approach, and I just feel that by looking at this image here that the light should come from the right instead of the left. Anyway, so exposure, and I always begin by doing way too much and then just dial it down. And where are we? So let's hit render, and it should just be, yeah. Okay, so we can dial it down. So from 30, we can bring it down to 20. And it's still too bright. Also, instead of just using white light, I like to just colour it a little bit. So maybe, we can use a kind of a yellowy, orangey type of colour. It just makes it look way more interesting. It doesn't have to be that bright. We can kind of just, bring it down just a touch. But anyway, so 20 is still way too bright. And so let's try 15. And so 15 isn't really enough. So before and after. So yeah, we do have a bit of light in, as you can see. It looks a bit better. And so that doesn't look too bad. There you go. It looks better. Illuminate from one side. Another thing we can do actually is, what else can we do? I think that's fine. So let's save that because that's where we're at now. And then Control D just to duplicate the light, and I want to do like a backlight. So let's spin it around. Let's do a bit of a backlight. Let's bring it up. And let's see what happens with the backlight now. So this is backlight. Backlight spelt wrong, but whatever. Okay, so let's just boom. Yeah, so we've saved it, and let's hit render and see what happens with a bit of backlighting. And so it's given us a bit of shine on the eyeballs, as you can see. There you go. So it doesn't look too bad. Maybe we can just kind of make this bigger, so we're kind of diffusing the light a bit more. And now let's see what happens. And can you see that hard edge there? And that's because the light has penetrated the geometry. So I'm just going to lift it up a bit more, and maybe just spin it around a bit more. Just bring it forward, and just bring it up a bit more. There we go. Okay, that's what we have so far, and let's just save it and let's just see it before and after. So that's with no extra lights, that's with the front light, and then that's with the back light. So there we go. Okay, so yeah, pretty much happy with that, to be honest. What else can we do? Let's take a look at the eyebrows. And I believe the eyebrows should be a bit darker, maybe, or not. Yeah, they seem fine. Okay, so pretty much happy with that. So once you're happy with that, the last thing to do is just set up for the final render. And so basically, to have like really good quality, a polished rendered finish, is first of all let's select the light. So I've selected the sky dome light, and what you want to do is with the samples crank it up to 5. Resolution 1000 is fine, that's all fine. Camera is 1. What that means is we can actually see the image during render. Now it doesn't really matter because we've got a background. So normally if you wanted to render the character without seeing the background, you would just dial it down to 0. So it still renders with the effects of the sky dome, you just don't see the sky dome in it. But the important thing here is samples 5, and we have a resolution of 1000, and that is fine. And then with the lights again, so if you take a look here, samples 1, crank up to 5, resolution of 512 is fine, and here samples 5, and everything is fine here. Okay, that's cool. We've got the transmission set to 0. We can crank it up to 1 just to test it. There we go. And let's just test the transmission, and it might not make a difference. Transmission is more for like glass, you know, anything glassy, transparent. Although strictly speaking, subsurface scattering has a bit of transparency in it, but it's more like translucency because the light does penetrate the skin a little bit, but then just stops. It doesn't go all the way through. But we can always have a quick little look just to see the difference. So this is where we're at now without the let me select the lights. There we go. 1. No, we don't want the camera. Camera means 0, means we're not going to see the lights, not visible. We've got the transmission as 1 on the back light, and a transmission 1 on the front light. And let's just see if it makes a difference. Now, I've cranked up the settings to 5, so it's going to take a bit slow to render. So what we're going to get is just a bit more of a smooth render. So let's hit render and just see what it gives us. And so we're actually rendering in the perspective by accidentally. So what I want is the camera 1. And as you can see, it's rendering a bit slower now because of the we've cranked up the settings. And come on, come on, come on. Okay, yes. Let me redo it. So select this window. There we go. We've highlighted. So Arnold knows now it's got to render from that view. There we go. So I'm not sure if the transmission makes much of a difference in this case, because like I said, it's more to do with like transparency, like glass, water, crystal, diamond, mirror, and so in this case it's not really a difference. The only difference we're seeing is, as you can see, it's much smoother because we cranked up the samples, but other than that, you know, it doesn't really make a difference with the transmission, but we'll just leave it on anyway. And so what else do we need to do? And so the lights are sampled at 5, 5, 5. Now what I like to do as well is just kind of grab all the lights. the lights and just put them on a layer like that, and switch R reference. That means you can't accidentally select them. So that's the lights done. So lights, layer, give it a color because it's not geometry, because that's the background. Geometry, that's the character. Let's put it back in the layer. And the reason why it came off the layer is because of the we selected the body and the eyelids and combined them, and by doing that it kind of broke the group, and therefore it broke the layer as well. So as you can see, it says polysurface 2. That's a null, which means it's an empty layer, and that's the character. So now the character only comprises of the eyes and the eyebrows. So we can grab this polysurface 2 and call it the body, and we can drop it in the character group. So middle mouse, click, drag. So there we go. So everything's in there now, and we really don't need that null layer, so we can just delete it. Alright, so that's the background, that's the camera, the projection curve we don't need anymore. So it's always good to, and I might as well spell it right, so backlight. So it's always good to clean up your outliner here. So you've got your image plane, which we use to model this character. We've got the camera one we've set up, and we've got the background, and then we've got the character, and then we've got the free lights. And if you want to, you can hit Control G and just put them in a group and just say lights group. There we go. So they're all in there. Right, okay. Everything is organized, as you can see. The lights, the background, the character. Alright. So the last thing we need to do is the actual render settings. And let's open it up, and we'll call it monster, long-eyed monster. Long-eyed monster. And so let's do a nice 1K render. Or we can do a 2K render actually. Maybe a 2K. 2K is going to be like really big and gorgeous, but it could take a few hours to render. So you know, you have to be careful with that. Let's just do 1K for now, and with the Arnold render we've got to crank this up, so maybe like 6 is good to get like a really nice smooth settings, and with a diffuse 4, specular 4, transmission, we don't really have transmission, to be honest with you, but we do have the SSS, which is the subsurface scatter, and I like to crank that to 5. And if you go to the ray depth here, yeah, everything seems fine. Diffuse, if you want to, you can just crank up to 2, and the specular to 2 as well. And I guess that should do it. And yeah, I believe we're good to go. The last thing is the ambient occlusion. So if we open up the hypershade and go to all the ambient occlusion nodes, you can see that by default the samples are free. It's a bit low, so we can like crank the ambient occlusion nodes up to 7, and that gives it a nice crisp clean render. So there we go. Let's take a look on that. That looks fine with the eyeballs. Yeah, yep, okay. And the eyelashes 7. There we go. So I think we've done everything. I nearly choked on my words there for some reason, but everything is set up for the final render. Control S, save your scene, and so there you go. And so the only thing you need to do basically is just do a quick double check, because this is very important, and make sure you have the correct camera. And so it's camera 1, and it is. And so you need to go to rendering. We're already in the rendering menu set, because we did that to use the 3D paint tool. Go to render. You got batch render, but you know, batch render, you use batch render when you're doing like a whole animated sequence really, but we're only doing 1 frame, so there's no point doing a batch render. So just open up render sequence, make sure it says camera 1, it does, and then go to render. And I like doing render sequence because you can actually see it rendering, because the render view actually comes up on screen and you can actually see the progress. And so basically you just click on it, and now it's going to render, and so it's going to take a bit of time. So I'm going to pause the video, and when it's finished I'm going to get back to you. Okay, so the rendering is done. So if you take a look at it, it will tell you how long it took to do. And I can't really read the text here; it's a bit too small. And anyway, so it took roughly, I don't know, just under an hour or something like that. So this is the final render. It's 1K, not too big. If you want to do 2K or 3K, be my guest. It will take longer to render. But anyway, so there you go. This is the character done. So we modeled it in Maya. We did the UVs, the shaders, added the materials. We painted the character in Maya using the 3D paint tool. We used the ramp node to create the pupils and the iris for the eyeballs. And we use the ambient occlusion nodes to create the contact shadows, as you can see at the bottom here and around the eyeballs there. And so there you go. That's the character finished. We also added a sky dome light for the general lighting, and then an area light at the front, and then another one at the back, just to improve the look of the piece. So there you go. This is the character done, and so thank you for watching.